Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf tzadi in Bava Kamma. And yesterday, over the last 2 days, we've been discussing Takanas Usha. Takanas Usha is the decree that says the following. Well, first we have to introduce the different kinds of property that a wife can bring into a marriage. A wife can bring in certain property where effectively the husband guarantees the value of that property. And effectively, he's just guaranteeing to give her the value of that property at the end of their marriage, whether he passes away or they get divorced. Of course, if she passes away, then the husband inherits the wife. And so there's no need to even worry about it. But in any event, the point is that that money gets written into their ketubah, and at the end of the marriage, that's going to be the amount that he owes her. Then there is something called nichse, and that's referred to as nichse ton barzel. Nichse malog is property that she brings into the marriage where she's not guaranteed anything. The only thing she's guaranteed back is the property, because the property never formally leaves her ownership. She owns it. The issue is that the husband has the right to the fruit. And by right to the fruit, it means the profits that are associated with it. But the easy way to think about it is the fruit on the produce of a field. So in that situation, so that's where we're going to have Takanas Usha. Takanas Usha says that even though the person who owns the underlying real property and doesn't have the right to the fruits has the ability to sell that property, right? If we think about the different elements of ownership, you can sell the piece that you own. You can sell the fact that I own, this land. I might not have any rights to currently plant on it because maybe Stan has all of those rights, but I have the underlying rights when Stan no longer has those rights. I can, Admea Esrim after Stan passes, so then we'll have, those rights will revert to me. So I can sell that contingent right of getting back those property rights and the fact that I own the ownership, I can sell it to Mark. And so too, you would think a wife would be able to sell the underlying property rights of the property that the husband has the fruit to, but comes to Takanas Usha and says, and that would be a valid sale. Who cares who dies first? Because it's her property. It has nothing to do with the contingent contractual right. It belongs to her. It's just the husband has the right to the fruit. So you might have thought that the wife could sell it to Mark, and Mark would get it and be able to use the property when the husband eventually passes away. But hold on, let's just finish the takana. But what Takanas Usha says is no. The only time that Mark would be able to retain those rights is if the couple got divorced or if the husband dies first. In those situations, then the property goes to the wife, and fully to the wife, and as a result, Mark's acquisition is a valid acquisition. But if in fact the wife were to die first, the husband, according to Takanas Usha, inherits the whole thing, and he retains the underlying property. Now you have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I understand that the husband has the rights to the land that she brings.
He has the right. He has the rights to the produce from the land.
You mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that he can sell the property.
He cannot sell the property.
He
can sell. He may be able to sell those fruit rights, right? The rights to the fruit, but he can't sell the underlying property.
That's hers.
It's hers. The wife is the one who has the ability to sell it.
Gotcha.
So 100%. Okay. So having done all that, so then, so that brings us to where we were at the end of the day yesterday, and so we have attempted twice to show that Takanas Usha was effectively. Yesterday we tried to show that Takanas Usha was effectively incorporated in a Mishnah or a Brisa, and that was why we brought that whole story, because they eventually tried to cite our Mishnah as an effort that Takanas Usha is something that is from the time of the Tanaim, and they were both unsuccessful. And yesterday we suggested at the end that maybe there's a debate among Tanaim, and we cited two brises. One brisa says that if a wife brings nichse malog, slaves, into the marriage, so then if the wife causes the loss of a tooth or an eye, so then the slave will go free. But if the husband causes it, the slave won't. And of course, that is very consistent with the idea that her property rights are real and his property rights are not. And then we had a second brisa that said that neither the husband nor the wife can cause a malog slave to go free if they poke out their eye or knock out their tooth. And that's because, and we said maybe the first brisa effectively ignores Takana Susha because it shows that the wife's sale, the wife's transfer of property is a valid transfer. And the second brisa says that no, there is Takana Susha, and that's why neither of them have the ability to transfer it. And we offered two answers to say that no, there's no problem. It's not actually, there's no evidence that this is an argument about Takana Susha. And we offered two possibilities. One is that the first brisa is pre-Takana Susha, and the second brisa is post-Takana Susha. And the second answer that we offered is that the first brisa applies Rava's concept that freeing slaves terminates a lien. And the second brisa says that even though ordinarily freeing slaves terminates a lien, the rabbis, when they created Takana Susha, they said that even the hand of the husband is strong enough even to overcome the freeing of a slave. And so now, as we pick up with the fourth line of 90a of Tzaddik Amud Aleph, we're going to offer a Ibailahu, third word on the line, meaning Vayusema, third word on the line. We're going to offer a third possibility and explains how both the brises could be consistent with the absence of Takana Susha. Because again, we want to show that these brises do not prove anything with respect to Takana Susha. So we've shown that they could both be consistent with Takana Susha, and now we're going to show that they both could be consistent with lack of Takana Susha. The E bias ema, or if you want to say Takuli Amaleslu Takana Tanai Takana Susha, both of them do not agree to Takana Susha. V'halcha bekinyan peres bekinyan a guf dami kamiflgi, and what they're arguing about is whether or not an ownership interest is a real ownership interest exists when you only have the rights to the fruit. So does the husband's fruit rights, does that constitute a sufficient ownership interest that no longer the wife is considered the full owner of the property? And so so how does that work? So according to the first brisa, we would say that there is no rights to the husband because when the wife pokes out the eye of the slave goes free. On the other hand, when it comes to the second brisa, we'd say that there is rights to the husband, and the reason that neither of them can cause the slave to go free is because neither of them has sufficient ownership in it, because they both have real ownership in it. And so, and this is a machlokas that we see in another brisa, this machlokas as to whether or not the rights to the fruit constitute and real ownership rights. And we can see this machlokas from the first two opinions of the following brisa. Titania, hamocher abdullah acher, if you sell your slave to another person, upasak imo almanashi yasham shenu shloshim yom, and you want to be able to continue to use that slave for the next 30 days. So we have the slaves, and so now we're going to have this slave serve for 30 days, owner one, and then he goes to owner two. Now the question is, a master is allowed to effectively beat his slave, but if he kills his slave, he is actually subject to the death penalty. Very different from the way the laws were, back in this country. But you're actually liable to death. However, the Torah gives an exception and says that if you don't cause that death in 1 or 2 days, and the Gemara understands 1 or 2 days to basically mean a 24-hour period. So if the slave survives for 24 hours after you've hit him, so then you're not going to be subject to the death penalty. That's not true, by the way, with respect to another person. If you were to hit somebody and they die even 48, 96, however many hours later, as a result of your of your hitting them, so then you are subject to the death penalty. So Rabbi Meir says, so now the question is who has the benefit of this 1 or 2 day rule? Does the first owner, who still has the slave for the next 30 days, have the benefit? Does the second owner, who is really the owner of the slave, but doesn't have the right to the produce of the slave at the moment? Or do we say neither? Or do we say both? And we'll see that there are 4 different Tanaim, and they offer 4 different opinions. So let's see. Rabbi Meir Omer Rishon Yeshno B'din Yomo Yomayim. The first one, because he has the right to the produce, Mibnei Shehu Tachtav. He's currently under his supervision, and so as a result, that first one has the right to the day or two rule. And if the other person was to hit the guy, and if the second owner, the eventual owner, was to hit the guy during those first 30 days and eventually cause him to die, even several days later, he would still be subject to the death penalty. Kasavar, and this all shows kinyan payros kinyan aguf dami, that owning the fruit rights is the main ownership of rights. That is essentially clearly the ownership of rights. And so therefore, the first guy who's still holding on to the right to use the slave for 30 days, he's the one who is considered the owner. He has the benefit of the day or two rule. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Sheni Yeshno B'din Yomo Yomayim. The second guy, the eventual owner, is the one who owns the underlying slave, because he's his money, he's his property. So Kasavar Kinyan Perus Lav Kinyan Aguftami. So clearly, Rabbi Yehuda says that the ownership of the fruit is not like the ownership of the underlying object. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shneim Yeshna B'din Yomo Yomayim. But 2 of them have the rule. Zem Shehu Tachtav, Zem Shehu Kaspo. One because he's under his responsibility, he's supervising him, and the other because he's his property. And according to the Gemara, Misapkale Kinyan Peiros, that actually there's an uncertainty about whether or not he says that ownership of the produce is ownership of the actual item. Do we say that it's like ownership or not like ownership? And we're going to say that there's an uncertainty. It's interesting that he doesn't just say that, in fact, both of them are considered owners, full owners, but we'll see that maybe Rabbi Eliezer will explain why Rabbi Yossi wouldn't want to say that both are owners. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Shnehem Einan B'din Yomo Yomayim. Neither of them have the rule of Yom or Yomayim. Neither of them have the benefit. Zelafisha Eno Tachtav, Zelafisha Eno Kaspo. The one because he's not under his authority, and one because he's not his actual property. So, in fact, according to Rabbi Eliezer, if either of them were to hit this guy and the guy were to die after 24 hours, that owner would be subject to the death penalty. So now we're going to explain Rabbi Eliezer's ruling. So Amar
what is the benefit? Well, how is it a benefit to be a part of Yom Yomayim? Actually, he's liable. I don't know that it's a benefit to him.
No. 1 second. So if, in fact, you're subject to Yom or Yomayim, it means that if the slave dies after 24 hours, you're not responsible for anything. And that's different from if you're not subject to Yom or Yomayim. If you hit your slave, or if you hit somebody else's slave, for example, and he dies 96 hours later as a result of your hitting him, you're subject to the death penalty. So it's absolutely a benefit to be subject to Yomo Yomayim. Yomo Yomayim means that the owner of the slave is not going to be liable if the death comes after 24 hours.
Oh, but if it comes within 24 hours, he's subject, right?
Yes, but everybody's subject to that. Meaning anybody else would also be subject to within the 24 hours. Everybody. It doesn't make a difference whether you're an owner. The question is really Yomo Yomayim. It's funny because I think I understand the underlying point of your question, which is that when we say Yomo Yomayim, what we're really saying is post 24 hours. Who has the benefit of the post 24 hour rule? So only the owner gets the benefit of the post 24-hour rule. We call it Yomo Yomayim, but everybody's the same Yomo Yomayim, meaning everybody has the same rule within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, everybody gets killed if they kill somebody, even if whether they're the slave, whether they're not a slave, whatever. If the point is that the person never gets up from the bed, that you knocked him in, that you hit him into the hospital bed and he doesn't get up and he dies within 24 hours, you're going to be subject to the death penalty. But the point is that if the owner of a slave has the benefit that after 24 hours, if the slave dies, he's not subject to the death penalty. So that's what we're talking about. Sorry?
So therefore, if the person isn't considered, even though he has sold the slave, but he still can use him for 30 days, and he would beat the slave, he's not.
So according to the very first opinion, right? According to
the first
Rebbe
opinion.
Meir, the Rebbe Meir says that the guy is going to be subject to Yomo Yomayim, and so the first guy is subject to Yomo Yomayim, meaning that if he beats his slave while he's in those 30 days, so then if the slave dies within 24 hours, he's liable. But if he dies after 24 hours, then he's not. And only him, because he's the only one who has the ownership of the produce. And therefore, Rebbe Meir says that the ownership of the produce is equal to the ownership of the underlying slave. That's the one that's the key.
So if he has it, so he's holding this, he has the rights to this slave for the 30 days, even though he sold him. So the new owner who doesn't yet have the slave, if he were to beat that slave during the first 24 hours, the slave dies, he would be liable, the second person, even though he
not only would he be liable for within the first 24 hours, but even if he died 3 weeks later, he would be liable to the death penalty, the second owner, because the second owner is not considered the owner with respect to Yomo Yomayim, according to Rebbe Meir.
Even though he purchased the slave.
Even though he purchased the slave, correct, because he allowed the original owner to retain the slave for 30 days. And we're saying that Rebbe Meir says that ownership of the fruit, ownership of that benefit is considered like the real ownership. So as a result, that's why he's not the second guy would end up being liable, even if the slave died 3 weeks later. It's ironic in some level, because I wonder, and this way I haven't really investigated, but what would happen if the first guy hits the second guy, the second owner hits the slave within the 30 days, but the slave only dies after the 30 days is over? Do we say that now the guy is owned by the slave, and therefore the second owner owns the slave fully, and so therefore we should apply Yomo Yomayim? Or do we say no, when the guy hit the guy, it wasn't his slave, and so therefore we should factor in the time when the hitting happened? So that's an interesting question that I have not investigated. So all right, but let's jump back into Amar Rava. So again, we're almost middle of the daf. Basically middle of the daf, just below on the right hand side of the Torah or Hashalem. Says Amar Rava, my taima to Rabbi Eliezer. What's the reasoning of Rabbi Eliezer? So Amar Kra ki chaspohu kaspo hamiyuchadlo. So the Torah says that we're going to allow we're going to have the person be killed, not be killed, because the guy is his property. So, and property is his in this wording is singular. And so it's got to be only his property. And so that can also help us understand why Rabbi Yossi, why the Gemara, maybe because Rabbi Yossi would also agree with this concept to say it can't be two people are the owner as a result of this rule. So in each of these situations, we're essentially saying there's only one owner, and who is it? So, okay. Kaman azlaha da amar amaymar. So now the Gemara wonders who says like Amaymar, because Amaymar says the following: Ish v'isha shemachro b'nichse milog. If a man and woman were to try and sell the milog property, lo asu v'lo klum, they haven't done anything, because and so the Kaman Rabbi Eliezer, it must be like Rabbi Eliezer, because in the end, Rabbi Eliezer is the one who says that, listen, it's possible that neither of the owners can be considered the real ownership. And so that's the answer to that question. So man tana l'had tana rabbanan. What about the following brisa where the rabbi said the following? Misha chatzio eved v'chatzio ben choron. If you got a half free, half slave person, v'chein eved shel shnei shutafin, or a slave that's owned by two partners, Ein yotzin barashei averim v'she'enan chosrin. They don't go free if their eye gets poked out or if their limbs get cut off. Meaning, if barashei averim she'enan chosrin is the general rule for when a slave goes free. If some kind of limb that would get cut off that doesn't regenerate, what's the status? And the answer is that they're going to say that the slave does not go free. So even though both of them are real owners. So Amr Le Rav Mordechai Le Rav Ashi, Hachi Amre Mishmei de Rabba. This was what was said in front of in the name of Rabba. Rabbi Eliezer. This also is Rabbi Eliezer, because Milo Amr Rabbi Eliezer, Kaspo Hamiyuchadlo, Hachinami Avdo Hamiyuchadlo. That the slave has to be only one person's slave. And if it's two people's slave, then the slave is not going to go free. Okay, so that leads us to the next Mishnah. And the next Mishnah gives a series of examples of payments, and we'll see that Rashi tells us that these payments are for embarrassing somebody. So what is tokea lechavero? We're going to translate it. We'll follow Rashi's initial explanation. If we take a look at Rashi, second wide line in the bottom of Rashi, hatokea lechavero, hikahu al azno. That's lashon mori. That according to my teachers, it's where you hit the person on their ear. So again, maybe it's you flick the person's ear, you do something that's very embarrassing. We're going to see, and Mark. And lishna akrina tokea mamish. A second possibility is that it means to actually blow on the person's ear, or to scream in the person's ear. It can mean, well, it's unclear which one is meant, but the bottom line is those are the possibilities. That okay, see you later. So those are the two possibilities. And so in that situation, no saying low sella. You need to give a sella. As a reminder, a sella is worth 4 zuz. So, and Rashi says no saying low sella mishum boshes, because of you've embarrassed the person. Rabbi Yehuda Omer mishum Rabbi Yossi Glili mana. You don't give just 4 zuz, you give 100 zuz, meaning 25 times the amount. Now, what about the following examples? Staro, you slap the guy. No saying lo matayim zuz, you give 200. La'achar yado, you slap him with the back of your hand. No saying lo arba me'os zuz, then you give 400. Saram ba'ozno, you pulled on the guy's ear. Talash b'saro, you pulled his hair. Yes, rakak. You spit on the guy, and it reached him. So then, meaning the spit hit him. Hevir talis mimenu. You took off his cloak. Para rosh kaisha bashuk. You took off the head covering of a woman in the marketplace. In all of those cases, no saying low arba meos zuz. You give 400 zuz. Turn to the tzaddik amabet. This is the rule. Everything depends on the honor of the particular victim. Now the question is does that mean that we're going to allow people to pay less, or we're going to make people pay more? And that's the question that the Gemara is going to ask. We won't deal with it yet. We're not going to deal with it today. Amar Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, "Afilu aniyim should be Yisrael roan otam ki ilu heim b'nei chorin sheyardu b'nechseihem." That everybody in even the poor in Israel, we see them as if they were free people, completely capable of supporting themselves, but just they lost their wealth. Shehem b'nei Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, because all of them, all the Jewish people, are the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So we all are important. Now, there was a story where somebody uncovered a person's hair in the marketplace. She came in front of Rabbi Akiva. And he said, you have to give her 400 zuz. Amar lo Rebbe Lizman. So the guy who did it, the perpetrator, says, listen, give me a little time. I want to show that this woman doesn't deserve 400 zuz. V'nasan lo zman. So Rabbi Akiva gave him some time. Shmara omedes al Pesach chatzera. So he stayed there watching her at the gate of her courtyard. Shibir, when he saw her, v'shibir eskad b'faneha uvo keisar shemen. There was a small amount of oil in a jug. An isar, just to be clear, is only worth um, is only worth 1/24th of a zuz. So here he was made to pay 400 zuz, and now she's and now she is and now the amount spilled is just worth 1/24th of one zuz, and yet Gilsa es Rosha, she uncovered her hair. Vahaisa mitapachas umanachas yada al rosha. She, she would take her hand, put it into the oil, and then put it on her hair. Vehemid aleh edim. So he had witnesses testify to what happened. Uvalov ne Rabbi Akiva, and they came in front of Rabbi Akiva. Amar lo, Rabbi Akiva said to him, Lazo ani nosein arba ma'asos. I'm still going to give this person 400 zuz. I'm sorry. And the person who did it said, "Are you still going to give this person 400 zuz? Do I have to give this person 400 zuz?" And Amar lo amar taklum. You haven't told me anything. Meaning, you still have to do it because hachova ba'atzmo apal pisha eno rashai patur. If you wound yourself, you're exempt. But when other people wound you, you're liable. They're going to be liable. Similarly, hakotas netiosav. If you cut down your own baby trees, even though you're not allowed to because it's a total waste of good trees, we say patur, you're still exempt, and yet acherim chayavim, but other people would be chayav. And so, in the end, even though we see that this woman might be willing to uncover her hair in public for not a lot of money, nonetheless, we're going to say that she gets paid the full amount when this man embarrasses her. So now the Gemara is going to start by asking, what currency are we talking about? So, Ibailahu, mana tsori tanan o mana medina tanan. What kind of currency are we talking about? The mana, the 100 zuz that was used in Tyre, or of the provinces? And it's important to note that in the provinces, the mana was worth 1/8 of what a mana is worth in Tyre. So Tashma, let's take a look. Dahu Gabra de Takale. There was this fellow who either hit his friend's ear. Asala Kame de Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, and he came in front of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya. Amrle ha ana ha Rabbi Yossi Glili. Here I am. Here's Rabbi Yossi Glili. Havle mana tzori. Give him a mana of Tyre. Shmamina mana tzori tanan shmamina. So we see that this shows that, in fact, it was the more expensive, the better mana that the Mishnah was referring to. Now, my ha ana ha ma Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What did he mean by here I am and here's Rabbi Yossi Aglili? That's a very odd language, because if you want to say and ilema hahikamrle, and if you want to tell me that what he was trying to say is the following: ha ana de chazisach, I'm the one who saw you hit the guy, and so I will be the witness. V'ha Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And I'm going to be the judge, and I hold like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, to Amar Mana Tzori, who says that you have to pay a mana from Tyre. Zil Havle Mana Tzori, so give him the Tyre mana. Lememra to aid Nasa Dayan. Does that mean that a witness can be a judge? But Tanya, we know that a witness can't be a judge, because listen to the following brisa. Sanhedrin shiro echad shaharagas nefesh. If Sanhedrin saw somebody kill another person, miktasan nasu edim, umiktasan nasu dayanim. Part of them should be set aside as witnesses. Part of them should be set aside as judges. Divrei Rabbi Tarfon. That's what Rabbi Tarfon says. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says no. Kulam edim heim. They're all witnesses. Ve'ein aid nased dayan. And a witness can't be a judge. So it's clear witnesses can't be a judge, according to Rabbi Akiva. So ad kad lo ka'amar Rabbi Tarfon el de miktasan nasu edim or miktasan nasu dayanim. And even Rabbi Tarfon, he only says that you have to split them. Some of them serve as witnesses, some of them serve as judges. Aval e nased dayan lo kamar. He wouldn't say that any of them could serve as both the witness and the judge. So the Gemara now explains how it could be that actually Rabbi Tarfon could say that a judge could be a witness. Tanya hahi, because when was that brisa taught? Kigon shira'u balayla, where the murder happened at night. Dulo me'evad dina ninhu, because that's not a time that they could try the case. And so, as Rashi explains, in Shira'u Balayla, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's, I guess, 5 lines down after the Gemara begin. The Rashis of the Gemara begin, and 7 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Tzaddik Amabet. Shira'u Balayla ulamacharat keshiba and ladun. The next day, when they come to judge, ain danin ella al pi shmua. They can only testify. They can only judge the case based on what they hear then. That's why some of them need to serve as witnesses. And if there were only 3 there, they would need to bring other people in order to receive the testimony. And so that they would be able to testify in front of those judges. If, however, the murder was seen by the Sanhedrin during the daytime, Osin al pia ru'uya, they can act based on what they saw of Rabbi Tarfon, according to Rabbi Tarfon. Miyad, immediately. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Tarfon Sirlai. And Rabbi Yehuda must be thinking like Rabbi Tarfon in saying that I can serve both as a witness and as a judge. So the Ibayis Ema, or you could say actually Rabbi Yehuda does not hold like necessarily like Rabbi Tarfon, but he could hold like either of them. The Ibayis Ema, and what Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya was saying is the following: Ha ana desfira league Rabbi Yossi Aglili. I hold like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So when he says, "Here I am," and here is Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he means only I'm going to serve as the judge, and I'm going to follow Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Damer Mana Tzori, because he's the one who says that you have to pay a mana from Tyre. And separately, there are witnesses that testify about what you did. So therefore, Zil Havle Mana Tzori, and therefore you have to pay the mana from Tzori. Okay. The Saba Rabbi Akiva De'ain Eid Nasadaya. Now, 1 second. Is it really true that Rabbi Akiva says that that a witness can't be a judge? Listen to the following debate. V'hatanya v'hika ishis re'ehu be'evan o be'egrov. That the Torah talks about hitting somebody. Now, this case is talking about hitting somebody and not killing them. Shimon HaTimni Omer, and Shimon HaTimni said with this, Ma egrov miyuchad shemasur le'edav v'le'edim, that given that the fist, right, this pasuk equates a fist with a stone. And so just as a fist is something that's unique and is capable of being seen by the witnesses and the court, everything else has to be, whatever weapon was used, namely the rock is the other example in the pasuk, has to be available for inspection by the court and the witnesses. So if, for example, Shimon throws a stone and it hits Reuven in the head and kills him, and the witnesses A and B had warned Shimon, and they take the stone to court, and now they're going to bring it to court, but then they lose the stone, so now the court is unable to investigate it. Means that if the witnesses lose that stone, there's no case. The case gets thrown out. So Amrlo Rabbi Akiva says, no, that is not when a case would get thrown out. In fact, that case would be fine. Because after all, did the guy get hit in front of Beis Din? No. Sheyodin Kamma Hiko, that the court would know how many times the guy got struck, the Almahiko, and on where in the body he got hit. Im al Shoko o Tzipart Nafsho, whether he got hit on the on his calf, or whether it's it defines here cartilage of the heart, meaning did he get hit in the torso? And what about the case where a guy throws the person off a roof? Omirosh Habira, or the top of a house, umes, and the person dies. Beis Din Holchen Eitzel Bira, does the court goes to the house? Obira Holechas Eitzel Beis Din, or does the tower go to the court? Of course not. V'od and Imnafla, what happens if it falls down? Choser Ubona, do they have to rebuild it in order to have the court case again? Of course not. Elama Egrov Miyuchat Shehu Masr La'edim. All that matters is that the fist is visible by the witnesses. So too, everything has to be visible by the witnesses. So the exception is where the person hit him with the stone and then threw the stone into the water, and you wouldn't be able into the ocean, and you're not able to find the stone any longer. So in that situation, the stone was never able to be evaluated by the witnesses. So the witnesses can't testify about its nature. So as a result, that's why that would be the case where the person would be exempt. But the bottom line is, Tani Mias, when Rabbi Akiva was arguing against Rabbi Tarfon, he said the following, right? He said, all right, it is Rabbi Tarfon. No, I'm sorry, against Shimon HaTimni, when he was arguing against Shimon HaTimni, he said, Katani Mias, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, V'chi bifnei beistin hiko. Did the person hit him in front of court? Shiyodim Kamma hiko, because so we would know how many times he got hit. Which implies hiko bifneihim aid nasa dayan. It would seem that the judges could be witnesses, and the witnesses who saw it could be judges. So doesn't that show that Rabbi Akiva is contradicting himself? So no, Lidvarav, the Rabbi Shimon HaTimni Kamar. Rabbi Akiva was saying it according to the view of Rabbi Shimon HaTimni. And Vilei lo sphere, but he didn't actually hold of that view himself. Okay, so one last case, and with that we'll conclude for today. So Tana Rabbanan, shor tam shehemis behizik. If we have a tam ox that kills somebody and then separately causes damage to another person, daninoso dini nefashos. They only are going to try it for the capital case, the ain daninoso dini mamonos. And you're not going to try it for the case where the guy inflicted damages and you pay money, and we'll see why in a moment. Muad shehemis behizik. If a muad ox does both of those things, daninoso dini mamonos. We're first going to judge it the monetary case. And then we're going to go back and then we'll try it for the capital case. However, if they made a mistake and they first tried the capital case, they don't go back and try the monetary case. Who cares? Why not? Even if they tried the capital case first, what does it make a difference? Let them go back and try the monetary case as well. So Amarava Ashkachtinhu L'Rabbanan Debei Rav D'Yosvi V'Ka'amrei Hamani Rabbi Shimon HaTimnihi. That maybe that we could say that Rava heard rabbis discussing this in the Beit Midrash, and they heard them say that who is this? This is Shimon HaTimni. The Amar Ma Egrov Miyuchad Shemasar La'edim. That we saw that Shimon HaTimni says that the object that does the damage needs to be evaluated by the court, meaning that whether it's a fist or just as a fist is unique and is able to be viewed by the court and by the witnesses. Alma be'inan umdana debeidina. So as we turn to Tzadik Aleph Amud Aleph, we say that it clearly we need the court to evaluate the object before anybody pays for damages. So, and let's take a look at the top Rashi. Afla Nezikin, that even for damage, and actually this will be the topic that we're going to begin with tomorrow. Do you need umdana? Do you need to evaluate the method that something was injured, or is it only umdana in capital cases? So that's going to be our question that we're going to start with tomorrow. Well, I'll rephrase that question in a moment. But what Rashi is telling us is that this pasuk, right, the pasuk that talks about the fist or the stone, it refers to a case of damages. It's not a case of death. So we see that even in the case of Nezikin, in damages, you need to have some kind of evaluation. Because this verse was written with respect to damages. A person hit his friend, with a stone or a fist, below Yamut, and he didn't die. And so here too, as well, when it comes to this ox, we have to evaluate. So is this ox capable of engaging in this kind of goring? So V'ha Kavan de Gamar Dina Lakatala, but here we've already sentenced that ox to death. So as a result, Lo Mashina Le Lo Umdana de Beidina. We are not going to wait in order to give a time for the evaluation. We're going to execute the animal immediately. Veloma aninan ladine, and so because we don't want to delay the din, we don't want to delay the court. V'amina lahu ana, and I explained to them. Rava says so. That was answer number one to why we could say that we don't go back and try a muad animal for monetary liability after having sentenced it to death. But I told them that we could even say that we can even explain this according to Rabbi Akiva. Afilu tema Rabbi Akiva. Halkavamayaskinan. Kigon Shabarach, where the and Rashi explains Kigon Shabarach, Kigon Shabarach Ba'alav, where the owner of the ox ran away. The Ein Chavin Lo La Adam, as Rashi, the third line down in Rashi at the top of the daf. We're not going to cause somebody to be obligated in paying the damages when he's not present. So so as a result, what we're talking about at the moment is where the animal was sentenced to death and the owner of the animal ran away, and so we're going to kill the animal according to Rabbi Akiva. We're not going to go back and try it for monetary damages. Well, 1 second, Ibarach, if we're talking about where the guy ran away before the court case, the monetary court case, kilo danu dini nefashos. Well, then, even when they don't try him for the capital case, hechi dainina le dine mamona below baalim. How can they try the animal for a monetary case without the owner present? After all, he's not. You can try him and you can sentence him, but the bottom line is that he's not there, so there's no one to collect for. So to kabel sadeh ubarach. No, we're talking about where first they got testimony that was in front of him. I mean, how can you reach a conclusion when he's not present? So to be able to to be able to contradict witnesses. So the kabel sadeh ubarach. It's where. When did he run away? He ran away after the witness's testimony was accepted by the court. And so as a result, when he saw that there was no chance, he ran away. Well, in that case, the court is able to find him liable, but he's obviously, because he ran away, there's no ability to collect. But so meheka mishtalim. Well, even if he ran away, well then even in the case where they did the monetary case first, how are they going to collect? So Meridia, they'll collect from the animal plowing. And let's take a look in Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down. Umishani, and we answer Meridia that we're going to add the answer to how we're going to pay the monetary case. We're going to allow the animal to do plowing. Mashahin will wait as hashor l'charisha l'schirut. We're going to wait so that the animal can do the do plowing and get paid. Umishalim l'nizak, and will pay the one who got damaged. V'acharei kain yad'inuhu dine nefashos, and afterwards we'll then judge the ox based on the capital case. Aval, however, if you did the capital case first, kadma v'danu liskal, if you already did the capital case first and it's subject to being to skila, to being stoned, loma aninan bedine, we're not going to delay the judgment, l'shahei l'ridja, and cause it to wait in order to be plowing. So as a result, that explains everything, even according to Rabbi Akiva. So again, it's easy to explain it according to Shimon HaTimni, but we can even explain why you wouldn't go back. That if you sentence the muad ox to death, you're not going to go back even according to Rabbi Akiva. Ihachi tam. Well, 1 second. Now that we have this method of allowing an ox to get rented out for plowing, why not, when it came to the tam animal, remember that's an animal that hasn't yet been subject to having gored 3 times, let's do a monetary judgment first. Vinishtalam Meridja, and will allow, and again, remember, we're talking about, according to this last explanation, we're talking about a case where the owner ran away. So, or we can say just the fact that, look, you collect in a tom animal, you collect from the animal. And at the moment, let's assume that Ridja, the fact that it's plowing is from the animal itself. And then we'll have it try as a in a capital case. So Amar of Mari Bray, the Rav Kahana, Rav Mari, the son of Rabbi Kahana, says, Zozomeres Ridya Aliyah Demarahu. Ridya is not considered the property, is not considered as if you're collecting from the body of the tom ox. It's you're actually collecting from money of the owner, and money of the owner is not used to pay for a tom. Rashi says this very nicely. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Aliyah Demarahi. It belongs to the owner. It's separate money. The ain begufo shel shor. It's not considered the body of the ox. It's as if it was other possessions of the owner. And there's a special rule, as we've seen throughout this Maseches. V'tam ein mishalem min ha'aliyah. A tom ox doesn't pay from other assets. It only pays from the animal itself. And so as a result, therefore, you would not be able to collect. So now, as I mentioned earlier, the Gemara jumps from this to the concept of estimating the ability of the object that did the damage to do the damage. And the question that we're going to ask is, do we do this umdana? Do we do this assessment? Do we do this evaluation only with respect to death penalty cases, capital cases? Because basically, if I were to, hit you on the head with a pencil, and I don't mean like poke you, I mean like just to hit you on the head with a pencil, nobody in the ordinary is going to be killed by that. And if God forbid somebody would be killed by that, so we would say I'm not subject, even if I got warned, I'm not subject to the death penalty because it's not reasonable for that pencil to cause that level of damage. So the question is do we say the same thing about monetary damages? If instead of, again, I hit you with the pencil and God forbid I hit somebody with the pencil and God forbid they get real damage and they need surgery. Do I say, well, I hit the person with the pencil. Nobody's going to get hurt like that with a pencil. That's not my responsibility. Or do we say, no, there's no kind of evaluation when it comes to monetary damages. It's tough luck. You did the damage, you pay the consequences. So do you want to know? If you want to know the answer to that question, you'll need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day and look forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Be well.
Damages is always hard